It was supposed to be just another routine day on Capitol Hill. Cameras were already rolling before the hearing officially began, quietly capturing lawmakers flipping through notes, adjusting microphones, and preparing their talking points. Most people watching expected the same familiar rhythm: long speeches, careful wording, and disagreements that rarely changed anything. But underneath the calm atmosphere, something else was building. You could feel it in the room. The pauses seemed longer than usual. Staffers sitting behind lawmakers watched closely, as if they sensed this hearing might not follow the usual script. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat quietly at the dais, listening more than speaking. She wasn't rushing to take the spotlight. Instead, she watched carefully as several Republican lawmakers discussed social policy, education, and what they described as divisive political narratives. One phrase kept appearing throughout the discussion: white privilege. Some lawmakers dismissed the concept entirely. Others described it as political messaging designed to divide Americans. Their tone wasn't always aggressive. Sometimes it sounded confident, even casual. But their position was clear. They believed the idea didn't belong in serious policy conversations. Crockett continued taking notes, appearing calm and focused. From the outside, it looked like she might simply allow the discussion to continue without interruption. The hearing had already been running for a while, and nothing particularly dramatic had happened yet. Many viewers watching online likely assumed this would be another long committee meeting that would quickly fade from public memory. Then one comment changed everything. A Republican lawmaker leaned toward his microphone and suggested that conversations about privilege were often used to justify government overreach. Another added that success in America depended on personal responsibility, not systemic advantages. The room stayed quiet, but the tension became impossible to ignore. Crockett slowly placed her pen down. She didn't interrupt. She waited for the speaker to finish completely. When she finally pressed her microphone button, her voice was steady and controlled. "Thank you, Madam Chair." The words weren't loud, but they immediately shifted the energy in the room. She began by acknowledging the importance of hard work and personal responsibility, statements no one in the room could easily disagree with. For a moment, it sounded like she might be offering a simple clarification. Then she asked a question. "If opportunity is truly equal for everyone," she said calmly, "why do outcomes remain so different?" Several lawmakers shifted in their chairs. Others looked down at their notes. The silence stretched longer than expected. Crockett didn't rush to fill it. Instead, she explained that conversations about privilege were not about blaming individuals. She described them as discussions about systems, how policies, history, and access to resources could shape opportunity long before someone applied for a job or entered a classroom. Across the room, one GOP lawmaker shook his head slightly before responding. He argued that America already provided opportunity for anyone willing to work for it. Crockett nodded respectfully. "I agree, opportunity exists," she replied. "The question is whether it exists equally." The exchange remained professional, but the tone had clearly changed. Staffers stopped whispering. Several people leaned forward in their seats. Even viewers online began reacting as the conversation sharpened. Another lawmaker joined in, warning that focusing on privilege risked unfairly labeling Americans. Crockett listened without interrupting. When she responded, her tone remained calm. "No one is accusing individuals," she said. "We're talking about structures." The distinction sounded simple, but it landed heavily. The discussion began moving quickly back and forth. Lawmakers raised familiar arguments about individual success stories and economic mobility. Crockett repeatedly brought the conversation back to data, historical patterns, and policy outcomes. At one point, she described how two students with equal talent and work ethic could begin life from very different starting points depending on their neighborhoods, schools, and family resources. She spoke like a lawyer building a case step by step, calm, precise, and methodical. The calm delivery made the pushback seem sharper by comparison. One lawmaker raised his voice slightly, arguing that discussions about privilege created division by making some Americans feel guilty and others feel powerless. For the first time, Crockett paused longer than usual before answering. "I don't want anyone to feel guilty," she said quietly. "I want people to understand." The room softened briefly, but the debate continued. Another lawmaker asked whether successful Americans should credit their achievements to privilege. Crockett shook her head immediately. "Success still requires effort," she explained. "Privilege doesn't replace hard work. It changes the obstacles." The hearing had now become the defining moment of the day. Staffers typed rapidly. Committee members watched closely. The discussion was no longer just about policy, it had become a broader conversation about fairness, history, and responsibility. Another lawmaker challenged her directly, asking whether she believed America was still unequal today. Crockett responded without hesitation. "I'm saying inequality still exists," she replied. "And policy discussions should be honest enough to address it." The debate intensified, but Crockett maintained the same steady tone. She described how historical housing policies shaped modern neighborhoods, how education funding varied across communities, and how economic opportunities could still reflect past decisions. Eventually, one lawmaker asked a question that brought the conversation to its most direct point. "Do conversations like this actually move the country forward?" Crockett paused before answering. When she spoke, her voice sounded calm but certain. "Yes," she said. "Because understanding always comes before progress." The room fell silent. Papers stopped moving. Even background typing faded. For a moment, the hearing room felt less like a place of political debate and more like a place of reflection. The chairperson eventually signaled that time was running short, but the impact of the exchange had already moved beyond the chamber. Clips of the discussion began spreading online within minutes. Some viewers praised Crockett's calm delivery. Others supported the GOP lawmakers' concerns about division. The same conversation produced very different reactions across the country. Inside the hearing room, lawmakers returned to their notes and continued the agenda. But the energy had changed. Crockett sat back quietly, her expression composed. She didn't look triumphant. She looked like someone who understood the conversation would continue long after the hearing ended. Later that day, reporters asked her about the exchange as she walked through a Capitol hallway. Surrounded by cameras and microphones, she kept her response simple. "We had a conversation," she said. "And conversations are necessary. By evening, millions of viewers had watched clips of the hearing. Commentators debated the meaning of the exchange. Social media discussions continued long after the cameras stopped recording. Inside the Capitol, staffers eventually turned off the lights in the now empty hearing room. It looked ordinary again, as if nothing unusual had happened. But moments like that rarely end when a room goes quiet. They continue shaping debates, headlines, and public conversations long after the gavel falls. And on that day, what began as a routine hearing became something else entirely, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moments in politics aren't the loudest arguments, but the calmest questions asked at exactly the right time.